This is Alexa Linton, and you're listening to the Whole Horse Podcast. We're now in season 6. Thanks to all of you tuning in and sharing the podcast with your friends to keep the momentum going. This podcast is dedicated to all things horse and all things that uplift equine well-being and welfare. And I'm having down-to-earth conversations with equine professionals about the little things that move the dial slowly but surely towards a better world for horses. You'll find all the episodes, 93 and counting now, on iTunes, Spotify, and wherever you get your podcast. Thanks for being here and enjoy the ride. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Whole Horse Podcast. It's Alexa Linton here, and I'm very, very excited to be introducing you to my next guest. Emily Frost is here. Thank you for being here, Emily.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a joy.
It's wonderful we've just had this wonderful chat already before the podcast. I'm so excited about where we're going today. And I would love for any listener who doesn't know your work, can you just share a little bit about what you're up to at this time?
Yeah, definitely. So I work with horses and humans that are trying to bridge themselves to a world of commonality. I like to refer to myself as a shamanic horse mystic or a horse witch, horse medicine woman, or even just an artist, or just plain old me. My work is really centered around dismantling all of what we perceive to be our differences, highlighting what we see as our similarities, and finding a common ground that's species appropriate while also honoring that spiritual universality that's just so common and connects us all. Like it's in everything. It truly is an intelligence that doesn't differentiate based off of species or, those differences.
Beautiful. And I know it was so wonderful before we started speaking together, you brought up all the photos of your horses to have with you during our time together today. And I would love if you would speak a little bit more about that, the sense of them being present here with you.
Yeah. So, they are my greatest teachers. And I'm really fortunate because we get to play this role reversal with each other, and we change that title with the tides. Sometimes I'm their teacher, sometimes they're my teacher. And Kiros Way, Kiro is it's a Centaurian legend who was able to create this understanding of his halves, his different halves, and actually separate in form. And that was the beginning of the horseman or the horsewoman or the horse human, as I like to call it. And so for me, all of my work is what I refer to as Centaurian, which is that beautiful common ground, all of the different shades and colors of connection, and finding that familiarity. So most of my work, all of my channeled messages comes from that Centaurian consciousness. I try not to have it just be mine or theirs, but to have it be this beautiful mix and this balance. Of course, with consent, it's all co-created. And I find that they love to be a part of this conversation just as much as I do, the conversation of evolution in the horse-human dynamic. Because as I think so many people are now becoming increasingly aware of, horses are here to take us on a journey that's so much more than just physical riding or, some of the more common, I almost see it as mundane exercises and activities we can do with them. They're such spiritual leaders. I was listening to a podcast a couple of years ago, and they referred to horses as the first shamans. There was all these beings sitting in a circle together at the very beginning of creation, the beginning of time. And humans were the ones that, got up and left the circle. And horses, cats, and dogs left the circle to bring the human back to the circle. And so we're on this journey right now that's becoming so illuminated. So many people are becoming increasingly conscious of it and aware of it, of finding our spiritual path back to wholeness with the natural world, the natural realm. And horses are such divine leaders. They're such a light in that journey. And so whenever I start to go into this work or this medicine, I really love to have my teachers with me.
Yeah. And you had mentioned that you think of your herd as, and I love this because this is something that I think of as well, and that my girls have taught me, is like not only the horses that are present and physical and on the earth plane, but also, you know, the training horses you have in, the horses that have passed over, and the other horses that have been, you know, your teachers and your, you know, that have supported this journey. And I remember that from Diva, you know, she said to me a few years ago, because I asked her how big her herd was, thinking, oh, it would be like, you know, the two horses that were with her. And she said, oh, no, 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 no. It's actually all the horses that I've ever met, all of the horses that I've shared space with, that have passed on or that are here. And even because of their heart presence is so vast, where we were living was a road with lots of horses. And she said, all these horses as well, they're a part of my herd. That really was like, wow, okay. Like I had been so narrow-minded about what that meant to her. And yet there's hundreds and hundreds of horses that are part of her, you know, what she's holding and what she's connected to, you know. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I love that. And you know, with horses, what I find so magical about them is it extends beyond that too. Like I love watching my horses and their intimate connections with the birds that come through with the different seasons and the different plants. Like they're so connected to all of the energetics that surround them. And like you said, they carry that forward. They carry that within them.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, that's beautiful. So who do you have up on your screen today that's feeling like they're kind of, yeah, sharing and connected to our chat together, for example?
I have up on the screen my past beloved Indiana. She's no longer in this. I mean, that's actually that's a big rabbit hole.
Sure is.
I could say she's no longer in this physical form, but in fact, actually this beautiful reincarnation process has happened recently, and she's re-entered my life, joined in union in her body with her twin flame, which was my very first horse, Tiamo. And so I very much so have her in presence in my herd again. But of course, it's always different, right? I have Tacoma here as well in the photo, Indiana and Tacoma. It's a black and a white horse, and they're actually in this divine yin and yang circle around each other, grooming each other. And then there's little wee Montgomery, our little brother, as I like to call him, our little pony Montgomery, just kind of tucked into his big brother Tacoma's side. And yeah, it's really interesting to me that this picture is what came up, because it's actually a lesson in all, like it's a lesson kind of in and of itself, this beautiful circle. So Indiana, you know, she's not here in the physical form anymore, but of course that version of her will still always exist, rippled out through time and dimensions, and through the love that she shared. So it's like this essence of her that was fragmented for lessons and karmic experiences in the life of Indiana was a great love to Tacoma. And now that Indiana has passed and she's been in union with her twin flame, so she's more whole in this new life as Rosavine, Rhiannon Rosavine, the one who rose from the dead. You know, she has a different place now in Tacoma's life even. And this is just one example, right? So there's this constant energy that's evolving and shifting and shaping. And so she's never lost. That story of Indiana is still rippling out, but there's also this new energy and this new dynamic. And it's really interesting just to kind of like see that that's coming up, because we had spoken a little bit about language and even just like the spell that's woven around our understanding of particular concepts or ideas that can be categorized under words, and the meaning of those words and the world that those words unlock and help us tap into. And so like even Indiana, that's a whole world in and of itself. And Rhiannon Rosavine, that has that energy of Indy with her, that's a whole world in and of itself. But the two of them connect through time and space, through different dimensions, from the in-between to the now, to the here, to the past, to the future. It's quite incredible. just the totality of everything, and it kind of comes back to our horses and how they've been connected to so many hundreds of horses throughout their lives, and they consider those parts of their herd. It's really beautiful just to see how much we are so individuated, so individualized, but at the same time, in the same breath, constantly connected to the collective. Mm-hmm. And how we can hold space for those dualistic truths all at once. It's kind of a beautiful image that just popped up for this conversation. Very much so reminds me and confirms and validates to me that the essence of Indiana is still in and of itself, but it's here and it's grown and expanded. And
yeah, it's something very interesting. I work a lot with death and dying transitions, and I do see this piece often, at least for myself, is this sense of that essence moving through. I had it happen for myself very, very obviously with 2 dogs that I had, and one dog, my dog Kia, passing, and then me getting just hit with like incredible, like the most intuitive kind of strong messages of there's a Chihuahua puppy coming. There's a Chihuahua puppy coming. And it was just this this mind worm. And it was about a year after Kia passed. And all of a sudden, through various strange circumstances, here is this Chihuahua puppy who was supposed to be a show dog and had all these issues with, health issues, and couldn't be a show dog, came to the farm. And I realized at that point, I'm like, this is what's going on. And when he grew up, his ears had the exact same, one was down and one was up, and just these various character traits that are like, oh yeah, like I totally see it. But what was amazing was Kia had a burden of anxiety and trauma, and had a really hard start. And Solo was just so free of all of that. He is so confident and so just sure of himself. So it's this essence that has come through, but obviously a very different, way of being in the world, and a more free and just a way that like Solo can fully enjoy his embodiment, where Kia just wasn't able to do that, with what she was carrying. And I found that so fascinating to see these. It was just such an obvious shift that had happened through the 2 of them. And I had definitely thought about this and seen these kind of pieces happen before, but to see it so vividly through a sense of, these similarities that were coming up, and my deep, deep intuitive knowing of what was coming as well. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that felt knowing, that full body, like, yes, there's no denying it. There's no doubt.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I'm sure there's some listeners going, oh my gosh, what is this even about? And I think, I've come to settle into my, like, oh yeah, like this is who I am. I'm so, and I love hearing this from you, Emily, too. I get this sense of you're in that sense of spiritual connection, fully embodied, unapologetic, just there. And I think it's so beautiful. I want to reflect that to you, that, because it's hard, right? Like, I know I've been sort of the other side of the coin, where I fought it and fought it and fought it and fought it, and was embarrassed and ashamed and all the things. And yeah, it's so refreshing and heartening, I suppose, to see you like just, yeah, this is who I am, and just living through that space. I think of all those years that I was fighting, that I could have been fighting myself, that I could have been in a different space. And I know that they were necessary for my particular journey, but I just really think, yeah, it feels worth noting the clarity that you have and the peace that you hold, the feels that you hold. Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's so interesting, hey, like just the amount of possible paths we can take to get to this place of embodied spiritual truth. And like, what does that even mean, you know? And I think the reason why it's such a difficult topic for some people to approach, they haven't in the past, is because it doesn't mean one thing. There's so many ways in which we can express our spiritual truth, because spirit is so all encompassing. It's such an expression of nature. And I mean, look at nature, right? Like the amount of seasonal change and sacred rage and calm, cool, collected, chaotic, beauty, messy, like it's all over the map. And it can look like anything, really. Like but it's mostly just honoring ourselves and our truth and what our intuition is saying, what our integrity is guiding us to, what we feel the most fulfilled from, how we find that abundance. You know, it's so freaking liberating when we recognize that we can, like, you know, go and buy a purse, and that can be a spiritual endeavor. We can go and eat a cupcake, and that can be something so spiritual. We're eating it for our soul, right? Like it's so fun. I think I'm really in love with shadow work and integrating the shadow self. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And like, just why do I have the desires that I have? And how can I take and dismantle this shame and this guilt around pleasure and around beauty and around indulgences? And like, how can I make that be a way of honoring source and honoring the divinity of humility and connectedness? And, you know, it's such a beautiful paradigm to play with, because I find that, especially in a culture that's still so contorted by religious trauma, there's still so much to be dismantled around, like, what is good, what is bad, what is right, what is wrong, what is kind, what is just nice. You know, there's all of these different categories and boxes that we've actually been limiting ourselves to fit into, that we aren't always aware of. And so I really love challenging, like, everything and all of my whys, and just getting to know myself on a deeper and deepest level, because it helps me understand the complexities of the world around me. And it makes it all just a little bit less scary, you know, when you can see everything for the beauty of what it is, and to understand that beauty isn't actually any one thing. It isn't any one way of being, any one way of looking. It's the totality of the chaos of it all. I have a sign in my barn. It's fun because right now, you know, a lot of people are like almost anti-chaos. They want calm, which I love. But the sign in my barn, it actually says beautiful chaos. Mm-hmm. Because I find that the most powerful alchemy exists when we can embrace all of ourselves, and just completely step outside of the boxes and have fun with the, you know, chaos of ourselves.
Oh, completely. And I think so often we avoid the chaos that is ourselves. Mm-hmm. And maybe, you know, to the detriment of that spiritual connection, potentially. It feels like it's all so interwoven as we embrace or witness the shadow parts of ourselves and bring them back home and do that work. There's more wholeness to the experience. I've been finding, you know, for example, you brought up pleasure, and when we, you know, are raised in this, I will often say, like, I was raised in a space where capitalism was, like, you know, the thing, right? And not in a bad way. It's just that was the motivator. So, okay, you know, the things that you choose and the ways that you go and the goals that you set are from that space. And as you can imagine, my journey became, you know, quite rebellious, fairly short off the hop. But that soup that I'd been marinating in was there even throughout that. And so the sense of, I need to be crazy productive, and I need to be constantly creating, and I need to, you know, these things, like I would have this goal of like, I'm going to be on Oprah one day. I'm going to be famous. Everybody's going to know my stuff, right? These sorts of things. And realizing as I dismantle all those shadows, well, that's not really what I want. Oh, that's not really who I am. Oh, I don't need to hit all these targets or match all these goals or produce all these things. And as that's occurring, recognizing, oh, right, pleasure. Right? Because it had been like a to-do list item, pleasure, to-do list item, rather than like, oh, eating a chocolate croissant at the farmer's market and sitting on a bench and listening to jazz while I eat my chocolate croissant and, right? Like sitting in the horse field, and we hung like my hammock chair out in the horse field. I'm just like sitting in this hammock chair, listening to my girls graze, like soaking in the sun, just the sense of how often do we disconnect ourselves from these, simple pleasures that equal really our connection to spirit, because we're so obsessed with the goal and the productivity and like, I got to get this done, and
complicating everything.
Everything.
Everything. Yeah, totally. Yeah. This just popped into my mind. This is one example of how we see ourselves limiting our potential for experiencing all the good and all the love, love itself. How many people are still debating whether or not horses or other non-humans can experience love, right? And for me, I understand love as a whole being experience. Love is an ultimate presence. It's an embodiment, but it's also a spiritual practice. And it's this integration of self, this understanding of self that goes beyond self to connect to another, to connect to all others potentially, because we can find love in source, we can find love in God, we can find love in earth, which is all the same to me in many ways. I mean, it's part of the total, right? Of course, it's just like Indiana's energy and Rosavine's energy. It's recreating itself constantly. And it's constantly coming under different names, which is why I personally believe that it's so crucial for language to always evolve. So some people get almost a little bit pissy if you have a play on words. I'm a very poetic mind, and I love to use words in ways that you might not normally use those words, or in sentences, or, in associations that just don't always make sense right away, but make you wonder. And then, it's expanding the understanding of what that word is trying to tap into. Because even when we say something, that we believe we understand, I mean, like, just think about a grand concept or a dream or a feeling or an experience that was almost beyond words. And you want to share that with somebody because you want to be in the love of it. You want to connect, right? That, again, whole being experience. Well, our whole being is the embodied experience, the power of the experience, the feeling of it, the love of it, like the presence of it, the ability to connect and expand and reach and go into the possibility space of it. It's like an absolute indulgence of the experience. And so when we share that to another, if we're using just human language, just spoken words, we have to then go through our library of words that we understand can connect. And how often do we end up actually distorting the experience through the translation of it, because we have to use these words and then believe and identify the experience with the definition of these words. And we lose so much of what the deeper magic and medicine is, right? And so I find that when we're coming to horses, it's undeniable to me that they experience love. Of course they do, because they're so inherently present and whole. They're so in the moment. They have so few distractions. And when they do connect, it's not necessarily ever through one particular lens or dialogue. Like, think about, how many meanings are behind a horse's ear twitching, how many meanings are behind a horse's tail swishing. It all comes to the context, the moment, the different layered felt emotions, the connections. Like, it's so contextual. And so it's kind of liberating in a sense when we can recognize, that vast potential that exists beyond any one which way of believing or doing or seeing or thinking or feeling, or because it all goes into it's all like a formula going into the pot, just creating so many different brews and so many different possibilities.
I love that. This question that you brought up of, can horses experience love? I think it's so important to name that, and this sense of how it, I think as humans, like you say, we get into the definitions. Okay, what does it mean to love something? And I found this fascinating too. I came from a very traditional horse background. And I claimed as a kid and a teenager to love horses. But meanwhile, what that meant was, frankly, like abusive behavior towards horses, abusive and violent behavior towards horses, which I think I'm not the only one that has been the case, depending on where we come from in the horse industry. But yet I was constantly proclaiming, I love horses. I love them so much. My actions did not match even what I was feeling. It was like I didn't know at the time what that meant. Even for loving other humans, I realized much later down the road, like, I don't think I would actually watch other people to figure out, like, how do people connect with other people? Like, what's happening here? It didn't come supernaturally to me to understand what that meant, or how relationship dynamics happen, and what love was, what that presence, what that bigger essence was. And so I love that you're naming that and sharing. I think a lot of us are somewhere on this journey to figuring out, how do I love here in this place with my horse, in this journey with my horse?
Well, and I love everything you said there, because I think it touches on so many experiences of love across so many different cultures and things, because how often are we taught to love without actually being recentered within our own love for self? And it comes back to how fragmented are we? We've grown up this whole, I don't think I've ever, unless you're you get to grow up in an indigenous tribe, or, deeply, deeply connected to earth, deeply connected to the seasons. I feel like I was fortunate because I had a different taste of love, but I was still fragmented in myself as well. I grew up with a practicing witch for a mother. There was so much magic, so much connection to the elements, but there was still dark sorcery, not intentionally. That's just what happens when we don't have an integrated shadow. It's one thing to be aware of some of our bullshit. It's another to actually find ways to integrate love and alchemize it. And so I find, like, for me personally, the pillars of my work of Kiros Way, which is the process of stepping into a Centaurian connection, which is merged consciousness with another being, which is the ultimate love, in my opinion, or it can be. It can also be the ultimate abuse and exploitation of power. And so there's a great responsibility that we have when we begin to go into relationship with another, especially in a culture that has conditioned imbalanced power dynamics. So to stay true to what love is for me, and to help guide fellow horse lovers into that place, and fellow human lovers, horses, into that place, we begin by recentering. We don't begin by connecting.
Mm.
So often when I'm working with a new partnership or, a new client, and I say client as like horse and human, they're together, but also apart. We begin by just stepping right out of the connection zone and we come back to center. We clean ourselves up energetically because that energetic hygiene is so necessary for us to begin remembering our wholeness, truly bringing in past parts and pieces of ourselves and remembering them together. And then from that place, we can then connect. And then from that place, we can then help to regulate, which is the alchemy. Then we can expand into the artistry of the connection and the love, and that's the co-creation. And then we can flow. We can find just the fluid, easy existence of following our integrity, following our joy, trusting our no's, trusting our yeses as sacred, divine, very, very purposeful responses to this greater love. And so when we have that full wholesomeness as our guide, as we recognize what it feels like to be centered, to be recentered within ourselves, to see what our horse is like when they're recentered in themselves, it gives us the foundation we need to actually understand what is being communicated to me. Are these feelings mine? Are they my horse's? How have I been trained or raised to receive them and respond to them? It gives us that ability to actually question what we've done, why we've done it, what we can do differently, why we want to do it differently, where we want to go. And it just keeps that cleanliness in the connection zone so that we can move in forward from that place of love, which to me is the ultimate goal. I'm very, very, very aware of my karma and what I leave in terms of not just like garbage, like I don't want to just be a minimalist with my waste materially. I want to be super, super mindful of what I'm leaving energetically. How carefully and mindfully and compassionately and considerately can I walk this earth while enjoying and loving everything that makes this existence what it is. There's this saying that everything happens to us for a reason, or everything happens for us for a reason. I really love the idea that everything happens from us. We are the creator. We are so capable of creating that source energy. And here's the thing, just because we're humans doesn't mean that that's exclusive to us. That's a law of this universe. We're all creators. We've just been raised in a society that has categorized and graphed out and separated and condemned and isolated and distorted so much of the truth of universal love and universal possibility. And as a result, a lot of beings are actually like in hiding. They're almost diminishing or keeping secret their greater gifts to protect themselves because it's all they have left after they've been exploited in relationships that have taken advantage of those conditioned and socially accepted power imbalances. But we can see, that love is so powerful that these relationships that we're cultivating with our beloveds that aren't humans, but that are familiars on a spiritual and soulful level, we can see that that love is still so powerful that it's lasting through all of that bullshit. And the story is being rewritten as we speak. The changes that we're seeing in, quote, equestrian culture, they're being like the whole entire story of the equestrian is being rewritten from that love space that, to be completely honest, is more from the horse than it is from the human, because humans have been have been out of that circle much longer. We left first, we left the circle. We have been so brainwashed in so many ways. And that's a charged word too, right? Like, so maybe we don't use that word. Maybe we use the word indoctrinated. That's also a charged word. So maybe we use the word fragmented or, stuffed down or shrunken, or, there's whatever word you can get that felt sense of, oh, I see what you're talking about. I feel that. Whatever word we need to use. It's just, that's more of the human experience than it is the horses. And so when we come back to the idea of like love just simply being a whole being experience, anchored and centered in the heart, it helps to kind of understand how our horses could be the guides for that. I love the two archetypes, Pegasus and unicorn, because they really help to express those polarity points for the horse. To me, Pegasus is the ultimate embodiment, the ultimate freedom that comes from embodiment, right? Which is holding the duality of form and formlessness. And then there's unicorn, which is this higher consciousness, this ability. It's almost like Sagittarius energy, right? It's so Sagittarius is the third element of fire, the third and final fire placement of our experience. And so it's like the tree of life. It's the teacher and the student. It's the ability to tap into all of the Akashic records of the past and the potential and possibility space of the future. To me, that's unicorn consciousness. It's like this ultimate initiator of truth. Mm-hmm. And so it's no coincidence to me that the horse has both of these archetypes, because they have fully integrated that truth. And to me, that's where the story of the centaur comes in. We want that. We've chased that. There's no coincidence that horses have built our empires, have built society and civilization right alongside us, right? Because, there's light and shadow to everything. I think a lot of the time we're guided towards the shadow and then taught to reject it, which keeps us stuck, because we see the shadow and then we just judge it, and we get really preoccupied and distracted with that. But if we can actually just integrate that and see the beauty and the blessings in it, then we can actually truly use what we have here to continue on this path of greater good and evolution that is aligned with ethics and everything else. Mm. So it's really beautiful how many lessons of love the horse carries within themselves.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. It's so when my mare Diva first came into my life, which was almost 20 years ago, 20 years in November, we had such a rough go the first few years. It was really, I was fighting all of my shadow, all of the power dynamics that I'd learned. Oh, yeah, so much there. And I remember she was so clear. This is what's going to work for me. This is what won't work for me. Figure it out. And of course, that huge teacher. And I remember thinking, speaking of names, I need to change her name. She's such a diva. Speaking of archetypes and shadow self. And I just got it so clearly. No, there is no other name for me. This is my name. Work with it. And so I have a partially written book called Becoming a Diva, because that was the journey. That was my shadow journey, right? Was to embrace these parts of myself that I was scared of or ashamed of, to let that part of me, out into the world, to connect to the world. And yeah, it was just like, it has been this incredible journey around what does that mean? What is diva? What is that energy? And how does it present in my world? And how can I embrace all the parts of what that means? Of course, in our culture, when we say, oh, she's such a diva, that shadow part of, she's high maintenance, she's, over the top, all these things, right, that would come up with that, emotional, whatever. And so that has been a big part of our journey together, to really unpack the shadow part of that aspect, and to also really fall in love with the whole of her, because I was rejecting the part of her that said no, the part of her that would not compromise and did not stand for my abusive behavior or, the power dynamics that I was trying to impose on the relationship because I didn't know anything different, right? It allowed me to start truly accepting and loving fully all the things that she is and was. And I think that's one reason why shadow work is just so potent and so, so important. Because if we're constantly fighting and wanting something to be different all the time, we're only loving a part of the horse in front of us or the person in front of us or ourselves, truly.
And then we're fragmented again. We're out of the center.
Yes.
And love isn't actually possible there. Only lust.
Only lust.
And the desire to continue truly, even if it's on a subconscious level, to continue the power dynamic, the power imbalance. And that's a predatorial thing, right? And it's something that it's also been kind of conditioned into us through many different past lives and past cultures that have conditioned that we need to have those power imbalances to stay safe or fight for them to make sense of our purpose in the life. And, it's all just this brainwashing, it's almost, to me, it's almost like a war on consciousness. It's almost like a form of, I don't even want to say like cancerous consciousness, because I'm really sensitive about that word now. And I have a very different view on what disease is at this point. I'm really fascinated by German new medicine right now, and just, the purpose of everything. And so I'm sensitive with that word, but it is like this alternative consciousness that feeds off of those power imbalances. And if we're not working for love, we are working for something a little bit more shady, right? Like, one of my beloved mentors a few years ago really simplified the concept of emotion for me, and said that we're really either operating out of love or fear, and then all of the other emotions stem from those, right? Like joy, peace, pleasure, and then like anger, resentment, grief, and some of those things might not be considered quote emotions, but again, what is an emotion? It's a felt experience to me. It's emotion. It's a charge. It's a particular chemistry of experience and perspective and, ambition. And it's the way in which the environment is mixing and mingling and reacting, the outside environment with your inside environment. And so it's really just this understanding of yourself and where and what that is, and where you want to go with that, and how formless you can be with that. And it's to combat that, this constant background noise that's trying to guide us and lead us astray from ourselves. The simple solution is ultimately recentering, coming back to that love. Whether it's, you're in a barn, this is just one simple example of what I'm kind of referring to here. You're in a barn that's still quite traditional, right? And every single time somebody sees you attempting to do something different, maybe a little bit more, I don't know what the right word would be. I'm trying to figure out how to describe positive reinforcement and, more compassionate horse methods, not necessarily through those categorized lenses or even those words that I just used, but like, you're just considering the other from a more centered place. So that's quite simple and that's quite wholesome, right? But the moment that somebody who is still serving this consciousness of separation, they're still serving this illusion of fear-based experiencing, they're going to see your centered self as a threat to that naturally. Because it's a light, it's going to illuminate a shadow that they want to keep hidden. They want to keep silent. And I'm a seer, so I sense a lot of things. I also see a lot of things, entities, energies, intentions, thoughts, feelings. Like I'm very, very receptive to many things, that we've been taught don't exist. And so that's where those entities attach themselves to us, is if we have shadows that we keep dark. And so the light isn't the be all end all, right? The light can still attract all sorts of things, moths and bugs, and like we can be a magnet to things that, you know, we then have to figure out how to deal with, for sure. And I find that greatest, I don't even want to call it a weapon, but if I were, I would say the greatest weapon that we have is to remember ourselves and to recenter ourselves and move forward from that place of love. It's definitely a practice. It's not easy. And that's one of the reasons why I'm so sure of the relationship, the karmic entanglements, and the love that we share with our familiar unfamiliars, like our horses and our cats and our dogs, our non-humans. They're very much so helping to remind us of that. And so even when they're not, right, like there's a lot of people talking about horses with like goddess energy, and I'm still seeing a lot of polarization. I am so here for that conversation, but at the same time, you know, we have to hold space for the duality of it. Horses are majestic, beautiful things that do connect us to our goddess energy. They're also brutes. They're also beasts. You know, they're wild, magnificent, masculine, feminine mixtures of magic. It's profound and it's beautiful. And you know, we lose so much of their magic when we try to categorize them or compartmentalize them into one expression of that magic that suits our desire to gain from them in that way, right? And it's so interesting because, you know, those are the relationships, like where there's horse medicine or magic being offered, where there's not a lot of reciprocity that's really happening, because those horses. And like, I mean, reciprocity is a complicated topic as well, because like, how do we actually reciprocate the amount of majesty and love that our horses give to us? That's a conversation that I think we should be constantly having with ourselves. How do I give back to this creature? And, you know, most people are like, oh, well, I work hard so that I can pay for their hay. And like, no, that's the debt that we have by captivating these creatures and keeping them domestic with us. The bare minimum is fulfilling their spirits, understanding that they are these dualistic creatures, and finding ways to be in harmony with them in their world and to help them feel in harmony with ours. So it's this complete bridge that needs to take place. And the only way we can do that is by, you know, dismantling that shame and that grief and that guilt, and also the arrogance and the entitlement and the sense of, you know, self-righteousness within the power dynamics and the dynamics that go into what it is to have a horse-human relationship and partnership in this life, especially in this life, in this day and age.
Mm-hmm. It just, yeah, letting that land here, because I hear it so often. Well, you know, yeah, I spend a bunch of money on them, so they should do all these things for me. So they should perform, and, you know, kind of like they owe me, you know, place. And it always just icks me out, because like you said, they wouldn't be in captivity if it wasn't for humans. And yeah, I feel like there's reparations to be paid for generations upon generations of oppression and violence, you know, towards horses. And that is obviously a massive other rabbit hole for us. But I think just remembering that, yes, it is our role, like you shared, to support horses and being in as best relation as possible with our world, because we've brought them. This is where they are. And how do we give back? How do we, meet their needs, prioritize their needs, and help them.
Help them be recentered as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just recentering ourselves, that is one piece of the equation. We cannot then connect with another being that's still living out patterns of belittlement, patterns of, you know, being taken advantage of or being silenced, or because most often, I mean, unless you're coming to a filly that's still nursing with their mother in a wild field with the other horses, you're coming to a horse that's been fragmented.
Yeah.
Right. And so part of the recentering process is reintegrating a lifestyle that honors that dualistic nature, the divine masculine, the divine feminine in harmony. And this is where it gets a little bit more complicated, but it's still simple. the divine alchemy of every individual, because we all have our own unique balance of those energies, right? And we can gain a lot of insight when we look at the stars. What was the keyhole our spirit slipped through when it came into our bodies? You know, what were the energetics of the cosmos? What storm were we born from? How do we flow in this life? You know, for example, my beloved Tacoma, I call him my silver stallion. He's an Aries sun. And then like almost 5 or 6 of his next planets are Cancer. And so he's like steam. He's like, he can be a steam engine, or he can be like a wildfire that can put itself out. He has the power of his fire, right? Because fire and water are dualistic. And so when he's integrated, he's empowered. He is a powerful force of nature. And so honoring that, I'm personally, my big 3, my ascendant, my moon, and my sun are all air signs. I'm Aquarius, Libra, and Gemini. And so I'm extremely elusive. You know, I can be very, very, very powerful in my visions. And so learning how to bend to his alchemy has been very, very important for our partnership to flourish and to thrive. And so, you know, just understanding these aspects, like Akira, my darling quarter horse, she's like the most beautiful dappled gray right now. She's a Taurus. And there's like Taurus, Virgo in her chart. And so as a super crazy, like just on a whim, let's do this. I'm super intuitive. I roll with what I want when I want it. I'm like so flowy that way. I have to constantly remind myself that less is more with her, and, you know, come back to the basics. Luckily, my Libra sun, Libra is ruled by Venus, which is like the ultimate romance planet, right? So I'm very Venusian. I love to romance. I love to flirt. I love to just, you know, indulge in all of the things that connect us and all the beauty of the world. So we connect on that level. And so I've recognized the best way to reach Akira, the compatibility space of our connection zone, when we recenter ourselves and we're in our individual energy, where we meet the most beautifully is when I'm scratching her in the most sweet spot. Not too long, not too short, just right. She's like the mama bear, her oatmeal, it can't be hot or cold, like, you know, or just sitting under the shade of a tree and not touching her.
Oh, beautiful.
But being in the space.
I love that. Well, we have to wrap up, sadly. I've just enjoyed this conversation so much. Thank you so much, Emily.
You're so welcome. Thank you. I enjoyed it as well. You can go down these rabbit holes.
Ooh, it's so fun. So I just want you to share a little bit about how people can find you before we close up for today.
Yeah, so I have a social media presence. So weird to say that. I have for a while. I guess that's how you technically say it. But I love to share my stories on Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, just under Kiros Way, Kiros Way. You can also go to my website, kirosway.com, see some of my offerings. I do channeled artistry to help liberate and awaken unicorn consciousness, most specifically, and to heal Centaurian karma. And so the karma of Centaur is actually quite complicated. Again, another rabbit hole for another day, but there's a lot to be cleared in that relational zone and in that weaving of soul and spirit between horse and human. So different artistry for that. And then, of course, like intuitive, personalized, higher self sessions that involve communication and all things learning theory and neuroscience, but with a very digestible lens. And I also have an app called Horse Love, and we gather every new moon and every full moon. And it's a space for sacred storytelling where I actually share very, very live experiences and moments with my horses, training experiences, but mostly conversational and relational experiences. And I voice over and translate what's happening, why we're doing what we're doing, what we're creating together, how we're doing that, the vision, the successes, the failures, all of it. It's like a space where I don't hold back. So there's so many ways. I'm having a lot of fun with it. I hope to do a lot of very, very profound and magical retreats and experiences here at the sanctuary in the future.
Wonderful.
Eyes out for that too.
All right, perfect. Well, thank you again for being here. It's been just a pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. And thank you, everybody, for listening in today. I hope you enjoyed our conversation and learned a little something. And we'll see you all soon down the road. Okay, bye for now. Hey, everyone, and thanks for listening into the podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm here today with my friend, colleague, and going into her 4th year of the Whole Horse Apprenticeship, Elsie Reeford. Thanks for being here, Elsie.
Thank you. I just wanted to pop on and say a few things about why I love the apprenticeship so much. I feel as though the apprenticeship has changed my life with my horses. And as a person, I have met so many amazing friends through this online container and been exposed to professionals and extremely caring horse people that I did not even know existed prior to entering this space. So I will always be grateful for Alexa and the amazing weaving she does between her bodywork knowledge, animal communication, and her ability to connect people from around the world in a common mission to bring horse people together for the betterment of the horse.
This year, Elsie's going to be back with us more in the capacity of an assistant and helper and mentor this year. And I'm really stoked that she's joining us. And I hope that you decide to join us as well. We start on September the 15th and registration is now open. If you'd like to register, this is a 6-month container. I try to keep the cost really accessible for everyone as much as possible. And if you don't have horses, totally okay. You can still come. Anyone with a love of horses is welcome. To find out more about the 6-month offering, you can head to bit.ly/apprenticeship-2023. Again, that's bit.ly/apprenticeship-2023. We hope to see you there. Bye for now.